Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Point Blank Podcast. I'm your host, Reformed Bad Boy Dryden. Today, we're going to be asking the question, should Christians vote? And the answer is yes. All right, but for real, though, we're going to get into this from a biblical perspective, as we always do on this channel, and I'm going to be talking about it a little bit right now. So, before we get started, we know that this week is the midterm elections. For those of you who don't know, we are voting for county council members. We're voting for state senators. We're voting for House members. We're voting right now for everything except the presidency, pretty much. We're voting for governors as well. That's also in the pot. This comes from Daily Wire. It says, "We're going to have a bad night," quote. Democrat strategist predicts disastrous midterms. Democratic strategist Hillary Rosen predicted disastrous results for her party, and she said that they only had themselves to blame after repeatedly failing to, quote, listen to voters in the weeks and months leading up to Tuesday's midterm elections. Rosen joined a panel discussion moderated by host Dana Bash on CNN's The State of the Union, and she predicted that Democrats were likely to have a bad night on Tuesday, largely because they had not tailored their midterm message to the issues that voters said were most important, namely inflation and the economy. We don't need to read much further. It's pretty basic stuff. We know that there is a, quote, red wave coming, because a lot of people are looking at Democrats and saying, you're the reason behind all my problems, which it really is true. I mean, you look at the Democratic cities, they're a disaster. You look at Chicago, San Francisco, Detroit, New York, basically anywhere in New Jersey. It's bad. It's very bad. These cities have so much crime. So right here it said inflation and economy were the biggest or the most important issues to voters. Inflation and the economy. I think second would probably be the crime that's happening. We're just seeing crime happen all over our cities. I mean, people are dying, people are getting shot. The amount of people who have bought firearms in the last 2 years has been incredible. I think in 2020 there was over 80 million guns sold, or new gun owners, something like the numbers are absolutely absurd. I don't have them pulled up for this right now because I want to get into the Bible momentarily. But basically, Democrats are going to have a bad night, but they've brought this upon themselves because they have caused a lot of issues. The economy, inflation, crime, gas prices, food prices. You look at the price of meat right now, it's been huge. I think the average inflation rate, or what's the average mortgage rate, inflation on mortgage? I don't really know. I think it's around 7%, when we know that in a few years past, it was 3% inflation rate on mortgages. So right now, people can't afford housing. People can't afford their heating bill, their food. It's really bad. And you have to remember what happened day one of Biden's presidency. He shut down the oil pipeline that we were working on. I think it was called the Keystone Pipeline. Don't quote me on that, but he shut down a pipeline. 1,500 pipeline workers lost their jobs pretty much overnight. And even though that pipeline wasn't ready to go, they were working on it. And by this time right now, we would have had more oil. So it really is a cause and effect that was caused by Joe Biden just making terrible executive orders. Very bad. So that's kind of the issues going on right now, is people care about their money, and people care about their savings. People care about their children, which includes crime and the violence that's going on. So people are going to be voting for Republicans in droves, I think. That's the basics. Now, the question is, should Christians vote? And I'm going to give you guys something I like to call a very general statement that a lot of people don't like. General statements are a good thing. I think they're appropriate. I think they're completely fine. But a lot of people like to nitpick and find the outliers when it comes to generalized statements, which is incredibly annoying to get that in my comment section. Basically, generally, from what I've seen, just in my own experience, this is my lived experience from what I've seen in churches, growing up in non-denom churches, is that I would say broadly maybe 50% of Christians don't vote because they say Jesus is coming back soon. I believe in separation of church and state. and we don't need to vote. That's what they would say, something like that. Like, I'm not of the world. I'm just passing through. And I think this is, quite frankly, it's silly. It's a silly point of view, but it's also a lazy point of view. And here's why. Let's start with Matthew 28. When we talk about covenantal theology, this is a place I like to go to often, but today we're talking about voting. Matthew 28, Jesus has died on the cross. He rose again in 3 days, and now before he ascends into heaven, he's talking to his apostles. Starting in verse 18, and Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. All authority, all of it, 100% of it. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. I'm going to add a couple phrases here just to make this make sense, because it does say it in the same place. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, teaching the nations to observe all that I have commanded you. That is the goal of the apostles, and I think because arguably we are supposed to mimic Paul, who is mimicking Christ, there's a verse about that, we should do the same thing. We should go to all nations. Christians should go to all nations, baptize them, and then teach them to observe. And observe means to follow or to obey all that Jesus has commanded them. Now, a lot of Christians say you should submit to the governing authorities, and they pull that from Romans 13. But what they fail to realize is that they're taking one verse at the beginning of chapter 13 out of context, and they don't read the rest of the passage. I've spoken on this before. I think Romans 13 comes up on my show every month, just about, because of the terribly shallow theology that some of these quote-unquote Christians have in my comment section. Verse 13, chapter 13, Romans 13. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Okay, so we have to subject ourselves to the governing authorities, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Verse 2, therefore whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For the rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So, the governing authority that God has instituted, his only job, the government's only job, is to be an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of the conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. So, in a certain situation where we don't have a governing authority that is practicing the wrath of God on the wrongdoer, if we don't have that government, a godly, moral government, I would say that we are being judged. Much like how the Jewish people, or the Hebrew people actually, the Hebrew people were enslaved to the Egyptians, and they were enslaved because this was a judgment upon them. Joshua 24 verse 20 says, if you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. So that's essentially what happened to the Hebrew people when they were entered into Egypt under Joseph. They turned to the foreign gods. So God did them harm and consumed them. Basically, he practiced discipline. He punished them just like a good father does. In Romans 1, it describes how God will turn people over to their essentially fetishes as a judgment. So we have a situation right now where our government is against the good doer and for the wrongdoer. It's very blatant to anyone who's paying attention. So therefore, right now, we are being judged. And the only way to get out of judgment is through obedience. Now, Christ doesn't tell us to be violent. We're not called to violence. We're not called to take over this country through violent force, physical force. So something we can do is resist tyranny, and we can also vote. Christians should be voting. Voting is not a sin. It's not a sin to vote, because we have to practice what I said earlier, disciplining the nations, baptizing the nations, the entire nation. And we can do that slowly through voting. Now, I'm not trying to, I know this sounds a little bit condescending. I'm not trying at all to sound condescending. I'm trying to speak clearly and slowly so you guys can grasp this and truly understand this, because that's what I want you guys to understand this. That's why I talk the way I talk. Jesus calls us to baptize the nations and disciple them and teach them to obey Jesus. We can achieve that through law. We can't force people to follow Jesus, but we can have laws where we can rein in sin. We can make murder illegal. We can make abortion illegal. We can make homosexuality illegal. We can make transgenderism and quote-unquote hormone therapy illegal. We can do these things. Now, people might get mad. People will still do it without the government's knowledge. But if they get caught, they should suffer according to Romans 13, which says that the governing authority should practice God's wrath on the evildoer. Now, unfortunately, Christians have become so nice, not kind, but nice, so they don't like this. And they're actually just too scared to even tell their sinful friends that what they're doing is killing them. We need that. We have to clutch these people out of hell. So Christians should be voting. It's not illegal to vote. Just go vote. Vote for someone who is godly, who has Christian morals. Vote for a Christian. If you have to be a single issue voter on something like abortion, be a single issue voter. That's okay, because abortion is bad, even though it's not the priority for most of the population. Right now, it's inflation, economy, crime. Go out and vote. Stop being not of the world, quote unquote, but take advantage of what God has blessed us with, which is a actual, what are we in? I'm blanking right now. It's not a democracy. We have a republic, democracy, something like that. I don't know. I sound very dumb right now when I talk about economics of politics, because I don't know too much about that. I try to stick to the Bible. But go out and vote. Vote for a Christian. Vote for a moral person. If there aren't any in your district, if there aren't any in your school board, if there aren't any in your city council, run. Do it yourself. And don't crumble to the masses. Be clear with what you want to do. Abolish sin. And that's possible. So go out and vote. All right, let's get into the comment section. See if there's any new comments. Someone left. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Anaya Hill left 18 comments on 18 different videos of mine. All of them are terrible. Very, very stupid arguments. But thank you for boosting me in the algorithm. I really appreciate that. Sage Gotcha commented on my Dylan Mulvaney video with that other gender fluid guy. So you're saying that these two beautiful people are both boys when they are not. So if you met me, you would misgender me because I'm non-binary, which means I don't identify as a man or a woman. And me and my girlfriend are very happy with each other. Okay, so what I'm taking from this is that this is most likely a female, a woman, because her and her girlfriend are happy together. One, I just have to say this. I don't care. I don't care. This doesn't make me mad. You're not going to get a reaction out of me. What I can tell you is that this line of these actions that you're taking are going to lead you straight to hell. That's just straight up. First of all, it's because you're going against everything that God made according to his order. You are rebelling against God and what he has told us to do and told us what not to do. God puts up these boundaries for a reason. It's for our own health. And you are blatantly rebelling against God, so you're going to burn in hell forever because of that. And I don't say this because I take pride in this or this makes me happy. It's just the honest facts. It's the truth. That's what was going to happen to me before I repented and believed. I would have gone to hell. And then God freely bestowed this gift of salvation to me. I repented, I believe, and now I confess my sin all the time. And because of that, not because of my own works or because of my own actions, because I deserve hell, but because God loves me, he has granted me a place in heaven. And that can be you too. But right now you're making terrible decisions. Also, Dylan Mulvaney's a man. He has a penis. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. I have to scroll past all these stupid comments to get to some better ones. Pearly Doodle says, do you know who Abigail Schreier asked for research in her book? Trans people? Nope. Transphobic parents. Her research has been disproved many, many, many times. You're wrong. Sorry, but you're wrong. And it's totally okay to ask parents of trans kids about their kids' behavior. Because what is the kid going to do? The kid doesn't know better. The kid's going to say, well, I was always trans. And then the parents are going to say, no, actually not. Prince Judah says he's telling the truth. Thank you. I am. Liebe zur Wahrheit says, for real, let us just use the term pro-death instead of pro-abortion. Pro-life and pro-death, nothing in between. I am pro-life because Jesus is life and sin is death. That's true. I think that's how we can slowly win the culture back, is to stop looking like the culture and trying to get the culture to look like the culture, but vaguely Christian. It just doesn't make sense. The reason Christianity is so attractive is because it is real and it is different and it doesn't hold back. Rocket Angel 3 says, yo, this random guy who is unmarried and has no children be spitting facts. Thank you. Eternity says, loving the consistency, keep it up, mate. Yeah, the consistency is great. But what's greater is everyone who leaves a comment and shares this video with a friend and joins the conversation. Thank you so much for listening today. Go out and vote. By the time the next episode is up, Election Day will already have been over. So I truly appreciate you guys for listening. Go out and vote. It's going to be a good time. We're going to see a bunch of liberal rage videos, a bunch of feminist rage videos. Should be a good time. Which that is fun. That is fun, and I will mock them for that. So thank you so much to all my patrons. Thank you for financially supporting this. And if you like this channel, if you like any of the videos I've made, whether you've watched them on Instagram, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, or the full-on podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, if this has helped you in any way to think biblically, then consider supporting me on Patreon. I would really appreciate it. But if not, that's okay, because you can still help by liking this video. Also, if you haven't already, joined the Discord for open conversation with a bunch of other Christians that really know their Bible. It's a great time. So thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all later. Have a blessed night. All right, blessed morning, actually. I take that back. Yeah, it's Monday morning, everyone, and I'll see you all later.